Hey, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in the Inmendham and such. No. Anyway, just the one video this week, today. And, but anyway, interesting. The anti-natalist podcast thing, whatever it's called, something. Anyway, the big tent thing that, Amanda does, anti-natalists of all kinds and all that kind of stuff. I'm not, terribly convinced that making the argument in so many different ways is very useful, because a lot of those arguments are, in my opinion, just crap. For example, okay, so there's been a few religious icons who have pointed out that, well, if they didn't believe in God, they would agree that life sucks. So, conceding the point. But you can't really use that logic because, frankly, they haven't enough, logical faculties to figure out that God is a bullshit story, that religion is silly. So, I mean, their judgment isn't worth much. Their opinion, okay, is diminished because, they've disqualified themselves as thinkers because they can't get something so obvious right. Now, I would argue that all these anti-natalists, who are anti-natalists for all kinds of silly reasons, in my opinion, not to be able to figure out that leaving the animals behind would be a grotesque sin against decency. To say that, well, human life isn't worth it, and then to say somehow that, but, seal lions getting eaten by sharks is okay, is retarded, frankly. To say it's okay if they keep losing, 8 out of 9 of their babies. They have to watch them die. All that kind of crap. If they can't figure out that, then, what's, so they're anti-natalists. They're anti-natalists for no good reasons. Because they like the letter A, or something. Anyway, so I don't mean this as a ridicule. I mean, it's like I said, it's fine, until, push comes to the shove, until more has to be stated than populations of all sorts should be reduced. As soon as, when the argument gets more sophisticated in terms of actually detailing a procedure for the actual process. It's one thing to say, mercy killing, or graceful exit, all of that crap, but the nitty gritty is the nitty gritty. Somebody has to actually push the off button on the respirator. It's one thing talking theory, another thing doing the practical act, and the fact is that it takes a little bit of courage and a little bit of you really have to be sure of what you're doing, and all of that crap. Okay, it has to be done well. It can't be done sloppy. We've seen sloppy suicide. It doesn't, it's not pretty. People drinking drain cleaner and shit. I mean, just horrible outcomes. But anyway, so what else do I want to say? It's great that there's this whole anti-natalism community, and that there are more people, and you got all kinds of different kinds of people and all kinds of different motivations, and that's all swell. But from my perspective, there's going to be a point where, like us and the Russians, fighting the Nazis, there's going to be a point where it's just going to be us and the Russians. And I'm not going to be, we're not going to be on the same side, okay? Because my side recognizes that we are the driver of this life bus, and we're responsible for all the living things, not just the human living things. Anyway, so with that preface, so there was she's doing a new theme, which is anti-natalism in a mechanical sense. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, some new theme. Okay, whatever. Yeah. I wish I could. This logo has something to do with it, but yeah, I don't. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just don't remember. But anyway, and so anyway, so the subject came up in terms of communicating with an artificial intelligence, as human beings have made one. And again, to me, it's a little bit bogus because it's not really an artificial intelligence. It's an artificial meme processor that just sits there and, sees what people say and, resays it, I guess. It doesn't really think. Jewels going through their thing and they die. And then you have these alternative views where, whatever, hundreds or thousands are being stabbed every moment. Right, so I'm talking about, all these different images you get and all these different appreciations, levels of appreciation for just, you could just involve yourself in the death of one person in the struggle, their last day on Earth. And that would be a story in itself. And it could be quite gripping and quite emotional. The trauma and the, blah, blah, blah. So I sort of was talking about how they depict dying in war movies and all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes, yes, the death is, a single death is meaningful. And in other movies, there's millions of deaths and none of them are meaningful. I mean, it's all just some sort of fun, and that's how easily we can turn these switches, in terms of appreciating what we're involved in, what the game of life really is. And it's almost impossible for us to appreciate, the depth of the tragedies and the sadnesses and the horrors. So I could take this opportunity, as I do sometimes. So cats again, cats. Okay, so the feral cats here, there was 2 litters this year. And one of them didn't do too badly. I mean, it started with 5 kittens, and it ended up with just 2 left. But they look like they did okay-ish. They made it to almost maturity. But another set of kittens was born really late by probably a first-time mother. And she didn't show up much. And, there was 3 kittens, and then there was 2 kittens, and then there was just 1 kitten. And, it had a bad eye, and the weather was getting cold. And I just, I knew I wasn't going to see him for very long, and I didn't. And I mean, I could show you pictures of him, a little cute kitten, blah, 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 blah. But I just mean, you could just take a day in its life. You could just take a day in the struggle, of trying to stay alive, and you could appreciate that this is all just too expensive. And this happens millions of times a day, millions of times. And every day there are all these little stories that just aren't worth it. There should be a God, there should be something that makes sure this doesn't happen, that takes care of these little sensitive creatures and keeps them from grotesque brutality. And if there isn't going to be such a mechanism, then we have no business cranking the, generator to keep the game going. Our job is to stop it. It's the only decent response, because it just can't keep. You can't defend it playing this play over and over again. Grabbing another kitten so you can have another performance, and then grabbing another performance. This is the price paid, so you can watch football. Bullshit. Too high a price. Alright, moving on. Advocate for what the hell you're an advocate for? I mean, you're just so something about advocates versus believers versus stampeders versus yes, lots of different ways people manifest their existence. Their how they impose in terms of trying to change things. And so I guess I'm rather passive, except in maybe the language I use. I'm not big on, beating people over the head with it. They first should have some sense of responsibility to be, well, you know, it should be that just the propaganda, the stuff we, you know, the stuff we subsidize and we say as messages, there should be a constant message to everybody, you know, like they used to have at 10 o'clock at night. Every night they'd say, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? Those little messages should be in the medium, you know, that say, you know, do you really know what the fuck you're doing? I mean, are any of the decisions you're making reasonable? I mean, you get in your car and you got a tire with the metal showing, you know, or something. I mean, are you making rational decisions? Are you really taking time to consider what you're doing and what the implications will be and what the risks are? And that's all that would really be required for people to take, you know, it doesn't take much thinking, frankly, to recognize that the game is quite dangerous, that every move you make can implicate somebody, can put somebody in jeopardy of harm. Be self-justifying. It's just going to be the you know, just you know, propaganda. That's a good enough word. It's just going to be a mechanism for creating propaganda. Yeah, but just the limitation of the AI is it doesn't have a sentient, it can't know consciousness. It can just be told. So it can be told that, oh, pain and suffering is bad, okay, and eating cupcakes is good. And it really won't understand, well, it's not so much that it's good, it's that it satisfies needs, and by satisfying those needs, you know, you get the relief of your hunger, or the relief of your angst, or the relief of your anxiety, or the relief of your, you know, trapped gas. You know, it's just seeking relief. So it's not really good, it's just not, it just undoes bad things. It doesn't create good things. So goods are mostly made out of preventing bads. That's a real concept. And it's a real concept you could tell it to an artificial intelligence, but he can't know it because he can't experience it. A high standard of living. People have already chosen extermination. Right. So, you know, this is the good news. The good news is yeah, even though most people aren't ethicist, most people don't understand that the game of life is too cruel to play. They understand from their own personal advantage that having kids isn't a brilliant idea. It's not going to be the road to their happiness and all of that kind of crap. And they've chosen, you know, half of them not to have kids in civilized countries. And that the only downside is that unfortunately half the world isn't civilized, and they're still pumping them, you know, babies out at a rate of 4 to 1 or whatever, and so they're undoing the good that's being done by the reasonable people reflecting on the options and choosing the sensible one not to make a mess. But there's too many. The mess makers are still the small, tiny. Actually, you know, you get rid of the most prolific reproducers. You'd only probably have to get rid of 10% of the population to have negative world population growth. It's a minority that causes all the trouble. They shouldn't be allowed to do serious things because they're fucking assholes. Right, and we should be able to say that. You know, there's you know, we can identify somebody as retarded and say you can't have a driver's license. You know, so it's not Nazi-esque to be pragmatic and rational and say maybe rights should be something you earn by demonstrating that you have some capacity to understand responsibilities, and that it shouldn't be just some, you know, do what you want. That's not good enough. That's not civilized, because we see what the consequence is. There's just too many people making too big a mess. And it's not that many, again, it's just this minority who ruin it for everybody. It's always like that. There's always some asshole who uses a ladder in some idiotic way, and then you have to waste money on labels put all over the ladder saying, don't be an asshole. we have to waste so much. I mean, the whole internet would work so much better if it didn't have to be layers and layers and layers and layers of protections against a tiny percentage of people who want to fuck with something, who think they have a right to trespass and break rules.
That humanity should reduce its population through worldlies like contraception and violence.
Right, you can't really hear much of that, so I won't bother playing it, but yes, that's the... so they let the machine do the talking when the machine was answering questions, and it answered the questions fairly well. I mean, considering it's just software and it's not a thinking person and all of that crap. I mean, even a person would hem and haw and blah, blah, blah. So it's really a quite precise, quite accurate, not terribly bad description of the circumstance. And yes, it's got its, the little catches and the little flaws. But if you were to say, well, what's a general average kind of statement? Yeah, it's close enough. It's Wikipedia-like. And that's all it really is. It's just Wikipedia with other stuff, other crap added. Something or some other, whatever you prevent. That it wasn't real harm. Right, so I mean, this whole idea that people think if you prevent something, then you didn't prevent anything because the something didn't happen, therefore you couldn't have prevented it because it never happened. I mean, idiotic crap like that. Prevention's always a real thing. The fact is if something exists in the way of something else, then the something else can't happen. This can't happen. If I put this here, this stops this from happening. I mean, it's just a fact that when this is here, okay, it prevented something real that would have been real. And it would have been real. And that's all it needs to have been, is would have been. And would have been is just as good as, okay, is. And so the value of prevention is real. I mean, it's just idiotic to say prevention isn't a real value because the thing you prevented didn't happen. I mean, it's just too stupid, frankly. I mean, you shouldn't even have to explain how, all the pain and suffering prevented by, say, morphine or penicillin doesn't mean anything, because none of the harm that would have happened if we didn't have those things didn't happen. Well, of course it didn't happen because we prevented it. It's just...
This gets tricky because, as you know, what exactly a definition of antinatalism must include to be whole is...
right. And so part of the problem here is that, yes, antinatalism, the definition is supposed to include every branch and every aspect and every nuance of every single person's individual philosophical perspective. And, that ain't going to happen. Even the word itself, I'm sort of point out, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, natalism doesn't really say anything. Okay, it doesn't say anti-reproduction. It doesn't, nataling is a little different than laying eggs. So it's not very good terminology. And yes, the vocabulary we have to work with sucks. And for a lot of rotten reasons, words are either catchy or not catchy, and it's sort of superficial what becomes a thing and what isn't a thing, and all of that crap. So, unfortunate. If you're going to concede that the definition isn't small enough for you to put in a paragraph, then right, well, what good is a definition that is a book, So, having words that have that much in them, that mean that much, isn't very practical. I'd like to have a word. You could just say inmendham, and then you'd have every idea I've ever had would be in the inmendham book, but you can't really do that, and you could never use that word in any context where it would make any sense. So what's the point? Words do have to have some sort of limitation and boundary. Definitions can't be too many paragraphs long. People who are pro-civilization, you could say, or pro-civil, what's a good word for... So it's just more argument about the nuances, about, if you want a decent civilization, you would have to argue that there has to be some controls over how people reproduce, because you got to take care of the kids and subsidize them and do this and do that, and so all of that matters, and that's going to be part of the subject. So you don't have to be anti-natalism or any specific thing, except you're pro-civilization, and you could end up being, you know, a civilizationalist could be argued to be a lot of things that he's not, in any explicit way or on purpose. But he is, just because to get to civilization, you have to do these things. So there's lots of people who are just pro better world, and some sort of natal responsibility would be part of better world.
Would the poor of the global south stop breeding, the better?
I don't understand why you can't understand. So he was sort of hostile. I guess he's like a Finnish guy, a professor, kind of, you know, raising this boogeyman of, you know, elitists, pointing out how the inferiors, so to speak, shouldn't be breeding or some sort of crap like that. And there's certainly people who are like that. I mean, there's people who think, you know, we should have kids based on IQ and all that kind of crap. And I would argue it's crap. Okay, first, that there's any such thing as a way to measure something's intelligence anyway in a practical way. You know, beyond identifying retarded versus not retarded. You know, in terms of just the cognitive capacities, you know, the ability to hear words the correct way and hold you know, a capacity of words in your head. You know, you can't really understand language unless you can collect a few thousand words. But anyway, and so you know, but I think this is, I don't think it's a very, I think it's a very tiny percentage of any pro-civilizationalist type people or anti-slop or recklessness people who are motivated merely by some sort of racism or superiority thingy. You know, it really just has to do with the pragmatic fact that certain people, as a matter of statistical facts, are more likely to make a mess, and it's just a fact. And you know, sometimes your only recourse is to act based on whatever indications you get and whatever deterrent you can create. So if you could tie a huge statistical correlation between sneaker wearing and rape, and the rape numbers were sufficient, there might be good cause, okay, at some point, to say sneaker wearers have to be searched, or sneaker wearers have to endure a little extra obligation, because the fact is they look like, and you know, not that they're guilty, but the fact is that you have to do something sometimes, and so sometimes profiling isn't totally out of the realm of reasonable, because you don't have much choices. And I would just argue, in cases where there's extreme harm at risk, you know, like buildings catching on fire, or something like that, you know, fire code officials or some, you know, some other thing where you've got to place a higher scrutiny. I would argue that cops, for example, are, you know, instead of having, you know, the lowest bar standards, we should have the highest bar standards. But whatever. You know, of accountability. Because the job is serious. And they just recklessly have sex and then have babies without even thinking about any responsibility. Right, so I was just sort of ragging on this whole class of people, okay, who they don't have any, they're not involved in any kind of mental interaction in the world. They're just living basically like animals and just behaving like animals. And it's not unfair to say, well, those people need to be corrected. You need to create an environment, okay, that's conducive to different behavior. It doesn't mean you kill them. It doesn't mean all this other stuff. It just means that clearly their behavior has to be corrected. Or they have to be, you know, it depends on how rabid they are, how diseased they are. I mean, this is a real issue. I mean, I keep bringing up whatever her name is, smallpox Mary. I keep forgetting the actual disease. But whatever. you know, it's a real problem because, look, she's a carrier. She carries the disease. She wants to be a cook. She gives the disease to people. She doesn't do it on purpose, but it's just a fact that she doesn't get sick and she carries the blight. So, yeah, it's not like it's personal, like you're saying, oh, you know, we're going to pick on you. Well, no, it's just there's a real circumstance, and, you know, it would be idiotic to say, let's pretend we don't know that there's a high risk, that she fits in a high risk category. Yes, she does. And it would be stupid not to acknowledge that. It would be unfair to her potential victims not to protect them. You know, whatever.
Opponents of antinatalism believe that procreation should only be allowed in cases of extreme caution and deliberation, with couples only bringing a child into the world when they are willing and old.
All right, so again, all this crap about people bringing... Again, we've already won the antinatalism argument. The argument isn't so much that we need birth control or we need this or we need that, because the fact is, in the civilized world, you don't need it because it's already working. People are already not having enough kids to maintain their existence in the future. So they're already on the path to extermination. Okay, so you don't have to press any buttons, and you don't have to do anything. They're already going to do it on their own voluntarily. And the only thing in the way is the ignorant religious bastards in these shit third world fucking cesspool crappy countries. And as much as that sounds unfair and all that bullshit, fuck you. Okay, it's just a fact that it's a lack of what is common decency in the civilized world, and that needs to change. And the only way it's going to change is the United Nations has to be about improving the attitudes of countries, not embracing diversity. Fuck the embracement of the moron diversity. They've got to elevate they've got to understand that living in shit isn't brilliant, and it shouldn't be something we say, go ahead and lay eggs in shit. I mean, come on. Not that complicated.
Able to provide them with a healthy, safe, and support.
Yeah, so all that crap doesn't really have anything to do with the subject as far as I'm concerned. There's no point in being an anti-something. Yes, let's just be anti-ignorance, okay, anti-reckless, I mean, look, it's just stupid. I'm sorry, it's just stupid, okay? So I'm anti-religion because it's stupid. It makes people stupid. And that's the problem. So let's get rid of this stupid shit. Let's quit having people on Earth who aren't using their brain, okay? They're humans, but they aren't doing the big human thing. They're doing a very animalistic, crude human thing. Alright, so summing up. So I would say I'm a pro-termination. Termination. Pro-termination. Not extermination. Just termination. Just ending. And gracefully as possible and all that kind of crap. And again, although the world, the bulk of humanity, okay, is behaving in a manner consistent with that ultimate objective, in the sense that most people are enough risk averse to avoid natural reproductive behavior, you know, and its implications. But there is the more important issue of not just declining human population, but again, rescuing all of the victims created by nature's imposition. All the animals who didn't sign any, they didn't sign away their right to say no thank you to the obligation to be born in shit and to live in shit and to die in shit. And we should appreciate them as victims and do what we can to rescue them through prevention. Yeah. And that's all it takes, is preventing. It doesn't take any any other action besides preventing harm. Alright, yeah, that's enough. Not perfectly eloquent, but it'll have to do, and such. So anyway, enough of a video, and, you know, till the next time, when I'll say something similar in some other similar way about the similar subject. Something like that anyway. Where I'll just go over it again. Over it and over it. And over it. Over it and over it. Alright, anyway, I'll get out of here. So, this has been a donotgod.com video presentation. Thank you for your attention and such, and so forth and whatnot. Appreciate it.